It's Tuesday, December 10th. We're a few hours after the market close here in the US, and I wanted to start with the short-term, it's actually super short-term view at the bottom of the screen on the ticker. The trade volume for today, NIO Stock had a trade volume of only about 50 million shares traded during the day. There was heavier volume pre-market, over 7 million versus over 6 yesterday. But interestingly enough, during the day yesterday was a 100 million plus trade volume day. And one of the differences, I've talked about this, is I've got the shortened time frame here dating back to when we did see NIO Stock after the second quarter earnings start to make a move up. We saw on most of those days over 100 million shares traded when the stock was moving up. And that happened yesterday with over 100 million shares traded during the day. Today, on a day with now even after hours, as I'm recording, only 64 million shares traded, we saw the stock go down. So super short term, that is the easiest indicator that I'm kind of just tracking and using to watch things. Secondarily, we've got the FTDs. This is the recent spike of failed to delivers. This is when there could have been naked shorting going on. And historically, what we've seen is these can have an apparent correlation with the stock price going down. After this, which was reported in the middle of October, we do see the stock price go back down after it reached that short-term recent high of about $7.20. So again, this secondary sort of indicator, I don't have it first because we don't get this real-time data. It's always delayed lag data. We should get some soon that'll be updated. And so I'll be curious if we see another big spike like this guy in the upcoming data. So, but I'll get back to you on that when I know. As far as sentiment, oh man, people are all over the place, freaking out, worried about Onvo with deliveries in this month of December. The goal for NIO and Onvo with the sub-brand Onvo deliveries to be 10,000. That's their goal. They have talked to, especially the CEO of Onvo has talked quite a bit about that. Now here's, and I've actually shared this 2 weeks of data from the insurance registration side of things on my thumbnail because I wanted to hone in on this and point something out. Usually, in quick reference, and we'll come back to this. This is the insurance registration playlist. Now, this data does not come from NIO. So I really just sort of use this as an indicator of things like, for example, this weekly data over the course of time. And by the way, I've done over 100 videos on this, so I've been tracking it for a while. What I've typically noticed or seen is that NIO seems to have the best numbers at the end of the month. I don't know, that could change with Onvo because it's still so new, but I just don't know, what to expect. So I'm sitting here tracking things and just sharing what I see. This was the end of November, and this is, I believe, the biggest single week for both NIO and Onvo numbers. And of course, one of these days, December 1st, would count if there were any deliveries, done that day, they would count for December. So even if maybe at an average of 800, let's say, would be a carryover, I'm actually more curious and interested in this number because this week, December 2nd through the 8th, is comparable to, if we go back to the second, or rather the first full week in November, look at the difference in those numbers, 3820 versus 5100 in a roughly comparable week. So, I don't know how this is going to play out, if, how the momentum, if it will pick up, and we'll see Onvo numbers get bigger. But let's talk now about the last 2 weeks. We'll first look at NIO. So this is the end of November, 4,100, just with the NIO premium brand. And again, end of the month usually is when we see the weekly numbers a little bigger. And then the first full week in December, NIO with 3,700. So not a big drop off. We'll, again, continue to track this through the month and see how this looks into the end of the year. But now for Onvo, this is the end of the month in November. So again, this number should represent the biggest that we've seen to date. And it does indeed. If, NIO is going to be consistent with Onvo and be delivering the best numbers at the end of the month, those would hopefully be reflected by the weekly numbers. But then if we look over at the first full week in December, which typically is a much lower number, and again, the comparable week for this in November is right here. So I don't know. I do think they need to get the numbers up, obviously, if they're going to hit the 10,000 goal. But I'm not terribly disappointed with this, in terms of the only, full, I guess, technically, these weeks were a bit of a carryover in October. But I think from a ramp standpoint, this would be a more comparable number for this. And so I don't mind seeing this number provided Onvo continues, to show better and better through the rest of the month of December and into end of year. And then really in the first quarter, I'm very curious, what happens with Onvo, for example, during Chinese New Year. If NIO and Onvo can get a lot of deliveries, especially with Onvo out, that will be a positive, at least in my mind. So anyway, drop it in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts are, and have a great day, night, whenever you see this. I'll be back with more content before you know it. I've got a couple of deep dives I got to do. Hopefully I'll get one of those ready for the weekend at the very least. So thanks for stopping by. See y'all again very soon.